On this week's show, is Valve going the way of VR what everyone wants? Is it over for The Walking Dead after season 12? And is Pearl Jam still alive? Hey, hey. Is Pearl Jam still alive? All this and more as we once again delve into the pop culture cosmos. And we're back with another episode of the Pop Culture Cosmos. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Thank you for listening to all of our great shows. And if I left the intro where I actually was trying to sing like Eddie Vedder, I do apologize for that. But it wouldn't be a Pop Culture Cosmos without my good friend. It's our own Eddie Vedder, the real Eddie Vedder for Pop Culture Cosmos. You got to check out what he's doing today at popculturecosmos.com. Also, his great show, Topicocalypse, and his book, which he's done not only on one, but two occasions now, done actual readings out on social media of some great chapters from his book. Congratulations, you suck. It is my good friend. It is the man who wants freedom, Josh Peterson. Jeremy's fallen still? He's been falling for a few years.
I'm just here to add a little even flow to the mix, you know?
There you go. Even flow. See, that was one of their best. That was one of their best songs. But one of the things we are going to go ahead and do today is review or share our thoughts on Pearl Jam's latest album after many years, Gigaton. That is now available. It just came out earlier this week. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that coming up here in a little bit. Plus, I wanted to go ahead and give a quick word to one of our good friends that runs Salt Radio out in the UK. It's Charlie McCormick, and I want to go ahead and get him on in a little bit as well, just for a minute, because we had some technical difficulties. So just want to go ahead and get him on a minute and play some actual music from Hyperschmidt as well, coming up on the first half. And then on the second half, we've got second half of the show, we've got Daphne Matthew from the Walking Dead fan base and Talking the Dead 18 Plus on Facebook. Both of those great groups she runs. She's going to be back on the show talking about all the rumors that are going back and forth on if The Walking Dead will end with season 12. We often said, or she's actually said on the show before, that she thought it was that was going to happen. Some things and some rumors have taken place that have said for or against that in recent days that her group is really going back and forth on. So we'll talk about that and a lot more when it comes to The Walking Dead and its future coming up here on the show. Plus, on the back end, Josh and I are going to be talking about Dirk the Daring. Now, that's a name that probably many of you are probably going, huh? Dirk the Daring is a famous video game character from Dragon's Lair, because Dragon's Lair just got picked up by Netflix for a movie adaptation, most likely starring Ryan Reynolds. So we're going to talk about how this might be a really cool thing or might not be a really cool thing coming up at the back end of the program as well. But first, my friend, I wanted to go ahead and talk to you real quick about Valve. They recently, just last week, have just debuted a game out to virtual reality and all their not only their virtual reality headset, but to other high-powered, high-end virtual reality headsets, Half-Life Alyx, which doesn't really extend the Half-Life universe in advance. It's actually kind of a prequel. It sets it up before the events of the Half-Life universe. Wanted to get your thoughts on them, on Valve delving back into the Half-Life universe, at least in some fashion, with its prequel called Half-Life Alyx, which is getting some great reviews, but again, it's just within the confines of a virtual reality format.
Yeah, so I've actually been kind of following this game a little bit. I don't have the history with Half-Life that a lot of people do, but from what I understand, like it's a game that's gone places many VR games couldn't go before. And with that kind of recognition behind you, it feels weird to me that Steam wouldn't be moving ahead with like Half-Life 3. But anyways, the game looks beautiful. It looks haunting. It looks nightmarish. It kind of reminds me of Dead Space a little bit. So I can only imagine if you're playing that through a VR scenario, that it's going to look a lot. It's going to be pretty frightening. So I don't know much about the mechanics of the game, but I have seen some screenshots, seen some video play and things like that. It looks fun. It looks like if I were to, if I were bored like I am right now in quarantine and I needed to play a video game, this does seem like something I would pick up. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, you kind of alluded to what I was wanting to get into. I mean, that's great that they're supporting their own platform because they do have their own virtual reality platform along with several other high-end Oculus Rift and all that as far as the high-end virtual reality headsets, but it is such a limited audience, man. And as someone who you and I before, not recently, but in the past have criticized Valve for not finishing a lot of the great games series that they started, that they have such a great fan base and following. And one of them is Half-Life, with Half-Life 2 episode 3. Which they never did, they never finished, a lot of people have been hoping for an episode 3 for Half-Life 2, have never got that type of completion. And this is a prequel set before the events of Half-Life 2. So I want to ask you, my friend, are you kind of disappointed when you first learned that Half-Life would be coming back to some type of video game platform, but unfortunately it wasn't the one that most people were asking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are disappointed by that, but I mean, at least it shows there is still an interest in the game, right? There are still people who want to play more games in this franchise, and I think that with all the time that they have been spending putting off Half-Life 3, that like this has to, and maybe there's an Easter egg, something at the end of the game, but we don't know, but this feels like it has to be a lead in to the eventual Half-Life 3. Why would they bother making more games in the Half-Life universe if it wasn't leading to something?
Your guess is as good as mine, especially when it comes to Valve, who will literally just drop a series, successful or not, right in the midst of whatever type of time frame. I mean, the Portal series, you can go on and on and on about how they have all these winning series. My favorite series from Valve, the Left 4 Dead series, which I've been hoping for a long time now for a Left 4 Dead 3, because I think that would be an outstanding game, especially in the more asymmetrical multiplayer platform settings that are really becoming prevalent in today's gaming society. I think that would probably really work well. That would probably, to me, really work well in a gaming format. Left 4 Dead 3 would be something that I think a lot of people would be interested in. Plus, going back to Portal, Team Fortress. How about a new update? I know they've been updating Team Fortress 2 for a while now, but how about a new version of Team Fortress? How about a new version of many of the old games that they have that are just being given updates and little small tweaks and whatnot? How about a brand new version of that? That would be awesome that they went ahead and did that. The problem is, though, Valve hasn't needed to do any game development because they've been basically making bank from Steam all these years and the Steam platform. And when you have such a large monster and a large beast that they're going ahead and basically adhering most of their talent and most of their employees to, they don't have much left over to develop games. So this coming out of the blue, not virtually coming out of the blue, but this coming out of the woodworks as far as Half-Life Alyx is a sign, hopefully, like you were saying, that they will go ahead and lead in with more games in the Half-Life universe and hopefully finish that Half-Life series as far as Half-Life 2 episode 3 or Half-Life 3 or whatever, that would hopefully that will allow the audiences that have been begging for so long a completion of this Half-Life series to finally fulfill that prophecy. But to me, it's been kind of arrogant in a way that Valve has just tuned out for so many years all these fans, all these gamers that have loved these games from the 2000s that were never able to get a real completion of that in the previous decade that we just ended. That's just been a shame because all these great games series that they could have had and could have continued. Again, like I said, Team Fortress, Portal, Left 4 Dead, Half-Life, as far as extending those universes in the future for those series. It would have been Counter-Strike, even Counter-Strike, they could have done something more with that as well, as far as a new version, instead of just trying to fix or mend anything with small updates here and there on the existing ones, on the existing games that have come out. I know they make a ton of money off it. I know they make microtransactions off of most of these games, that has rewarded them greatly. And I know that with the Steam platform, it basically they haven't had any need to, but wouldn't it have been nice if they just did that? And it's not like they wouldn't have been successful, because those games would have been extremely successful had they been continued in some form or fashion.
No, I 100% agree with you. I just think that they got too caught up in the idea of. Can you hear my dogs barking? Hold on one second. They're like chasing each other around, barking. Yes, no, I absolutely 100% agree with you. But I feel like Steam was such a massive undertaking, and they got so caught up in what was going on with that. Plus the there's some kind of controversy going on with one of their big producers, right? Like he was accused of molesting a teenager or something like that. So I think they meant to, and things just kept on happening that got in the way of that. I hope, again, I hope that Alex is like a step in the right direction for them, a step back towards that goal that they hopefully originally set in the first place.
That would be nice if that's the case, because there's a great lineup of games that they could go ahead and continue, like I just previously mentioned, that I know a lot of fans would go ahead and dish out or say, hey, take my money now. Absolutely, take my money now. But it's hard to get Valve to understand that from the gamer's point of view, what they want and they desire. I mean, we've had this issue before with Mass Effect. We've had this issue before with other game series, which these developers are somewhat reluctant to go ahead and continue for one reason or another. But with Valve, it's just a series of games which you could say, hey, I would like a new version of this. I would like something that would be updated for the here and now. We've got the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox One Series X coming around the corner. Wouldn't it be great if we had some Valve games that were brand new specifically for those systems? Or maybe updated for the 8K ultra powerhouse workstations that you can now have as your PCs. Wouldn't it be great to have that environment, to have something from Valve fully take advantage of it outside of just a VR game, which is only going to be able to be taken advantage of no matter how good it is. And it did get a 10 on IGN, and it's getting great reviews everywhere. I'm not dissuading that. I'm not telling you otherwise. But it is something that only a small few is going to actually be able to get their hands on, because A, it's going to take one of the higher powered, more expensive VR units to go ahead and play it, and B, VR in itself never really blew up the way they wanted to, the way we had thought it wouldn't blow up 2-3 years ago, when we said, okay, it's going to be if we're a niche gaming audience, and ultimately virtual reality. That's what happened. It just ended up being just for a niche audience.
Yeah, I mean, again, this whole VR drop was really unexpected, but at the same time, like there is a story there. So obviously there is, a final or another act in the Half-Life universe that they're trying to lead up to. So, we're being hopeful. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think that there will be something come next gen consoles, and obviously, Steam's a big deal on PC, so that'll probably be dropped there too. But if they're smart, they would actually do a PC exclusive and get more people onto Steam instead of the Epic Store. But what do I know about marketing?
And that's true. Although there was a great deal the other day at the Epic Store, the recent hit World War Z, something you and I might want to get interested in if our PCs can handle it. That's free on the Epic Store, but don't tell anybody I said so. I think the deal's going on is, even if you hear this, but go ahead, check it out today at the Epic Store. But I get what you're saying when it comes to Valve and Steam. they have a lot of developers focus games specifically for that platform. I get that. They still, even to this day, I mean, I know it's starting to get a little bit edgy and dicey between Epic and Steam. You got to choose one or the other, Coke or Pepsi, things like that. But still, a lot of people play their games on video game platforms. So it's still kind of frustrating to see that Valve doesn't fully get the message. They bring out this great game, yet a very limited amount of people are going to be playing it. So I'll leave you with this. One last question I want to ask you when it touches upon what Valve is doing and what Valve should be doing going forward. In fact, what you would like them to be doing per se. When it comes to Valve, is there one series out of the ones I mentioned, whether it's Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, Portal, Left 4 Dead, Half-Life, or anything else under the Valve banner that you would like to see? If there's one property you would like to see extended into something that all gamers can enjoy, or at least the majority of them anyways, what would that one series be?
I'm sorry, there was a lot right there. What is the question?
What if you were to choose one series out of any of the ones that they do to continue? Let's say, okay, Josh, we're going to make Valve comes to you tomorrow and says, "Hey, Josh, we're going to go ahead and develop a game, a sequel to one of our existing properties."
I would say
for you,
I would say Portal. I really like the Portal games a lot.
Why so? How so?
Just because they're not, they do have a story. They are part of the Half-Life universe, but there's also something extra to them, right? It's something you can kind of play mindlessly. The same way that like I look at the original Prey on Xbox 360, there was not really a point to it. I was just playing it, and the story was an afterthought to me, just being able to run through corridors, and solve mysteries and shoot things and put portals out there. So I like it because it's kind of mindless.
For me, I choose Left 4 Dead and the Left 4 Dead series because, speaking of mindless, this is absolute mindless fun. It's always been a blast. Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2, especially for me, that's been such a great time to play every time I do play it. And especially if you've got three great friends over the internet that also want to go ahead and play. And the madness ensues when all the zombies attack you and whatnot. So it's always an enjoyable time to play the Left 4 Dead series. So that is probably my favorite series from Valve. I'm hoping they'll extend that with a Left 4 Dead 3 at some point in time, maybe for the new consoles. We'll have to wait and see. But Valve, if you're listening, thank you so much for at least producing something within the universe of Half-Life. But now's the time for you to get back into business of game development and produce a lot of other games for your many successful series that I think a lot of fans would be hoping for. What are your thoughts on the latest Half-Life game, a prequel for the VR in Half-Life Alyx? And then also, is there a series you would love to see them extend for the major consoles and PC and Valve, and their Steam engine as well? Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Well, coming up next, Charlie McCormick is coming on real quick to talk about Salt Radio. And then right after that, Josh and I are going to be talking about Pearl Jam and of course, a great song coming up as well from Hyperschmidt, coming up right after the break. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. Well, I want to thank Charlie McCormick for coming on to the show real quick, talking about Salt Radio. Again, check out Salt Radio on Facebook, one of our great radio stations that we go ahead and syndicate to each and every week. And I cannot thank him enough for stopping by real quick on the show. Josh, speaking of music, before we head to another great song from Hyperschmidt that we've played on the show before, but it's also one of our favorites, I want to go ahead and ask you real quick. You recently listened to the brand new album from Pearl Jam. So Pearl Jam jokes aside, which I think we already just brushed away by this point, what are your thoughts on the latest album from Pearl Jam entitled Gigaton?
So I noticed with Pearl Jam is like they're not grunge anymore. They sound more like 80s rock, I guess. You know, they even got like synthesizers and everything in there. So that being said, like I loved what was the album that uh
This is not your daddy's Pearl Jam.
no, no, this is like cuz I love 10. I love 10. I love Verses, I love Vitalogy. Like I really Yield even. I really love those early Pearl Jam albums, and it seems like with this stuff they are while the music's still fast, they don't have those like heart-wrenching ballads that they used to have, even with like Jeremy or Last Kiss or really like anything shoot, like I don't know, it just doesn't elicit an emotional response for me. It feels like it's very punk rock. And that might be super stoked that they're still around, still doing their thing, but like I can't. I don't know. This is hard for me because like I want to like their music and I don't think it's terrible, but I don't feel like it's Pearl Jam, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you. It's not your Pearl Jam from the early 1990s. I mean, if you're looking for that, look somewhere else, because I don't think Pearl Jam at this stage of their career, the stage of their lives, can repeat what they did back in the early 80s. And you're right, they did use a little bit of synthesizer in this latest album. I personally don't mind when groups do. I mean, personally, I have a lot of groups that are out there that I've enjoyed that also emphasize the synthesizer to even a small or a larger degree. But when it comes to Pearl Jam, I noticed a big difference from the way Pearl Jam sounds now to the way Pearl Jam sounds there, and the simple force and intensity that the group had back in the early 90s is just not there with me. It sounds more commercial, it sounds more pop, sounds more inline, mainstream, whatever you want to call it. It just sounds more regular. It sounds more like your dad's Pearl Jam, as opposed to the Pearl Jam that was really on the cutting edge back in the early 90s. And that's unfortunately that's just the unfortunate part of getting older at time. I mean, you and I have talked about how U2 is my all-time favorite group. U2 at this point in their career, unfortunately, is not the U2 that I've enjoyed for so many years. In fact, you joked about how U2 was put on everybody's Apple device and how nauseating that was and how bad that was. And that's because of the fact that U2 simply does not have that same grip on pop on music that it once had. And the same thing goes for Pearl Jam. And it just happens with the course of time. There's really very few artists that have ever been able to maintain that hold for more than 20 years let's say 2 decades worth of music without seeing a drop off. And I will say that for the most part, critics are liking it. It's got an average 81 it's got an 81 average on Metacritic, which a very solid. I think a lot of critics are enjoying it. I'm sure a lot of newer fans may enjoy it too, but for those hardcore fans from the 90s, it sounds like you are one of them that were brought up on the cutting edge sounds of Eddie Vedder and the cutting, just the transcendent sounds of Pearl Jam and the Seattle sound of that time. It's really not what you're looking for anymore. And unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be able to get it.
Yeah, I mean, so again, like I loved, when Pearl Jam first came back on the scene back in the 2000s, right? With what's the album that had Worldwide Suicide on it? Like, I dug that, and had some pretty good songs, especially some of the stuff Eddie Vedder did around the time Into the Wild came out. Like, I really like some of that music, but this album, it doesn't have any of those slow melodies on it, right? It's all just in your face punk rock, and like while I don't hate it, it's not something that I'm going to find myself listening to over and over again. You're muted.
Sorry. Well, that's the latest. Well, that's our thoughts on the latest album from Pearl Jam, Gigaton. You can go ahead and check it out today on Apple Music or wherever you get your music, because it is available. It's doing quite well with the critics, but for us, it's just something that we're not. I don't know. It's just not something that we're basically gelling with. Maybe because of the fact that for us, for us, the real sound of Pearl Jam seems like a distant memory at this point in time. What are your thoughts on Pearl Jam's latest album, Gigaton? Please share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Well, I promised Charlie McCormick, our good friend at Salt Radio, a song that we would play and a song we shall, one of our favorites. This is Chad Smith and Hyperschmidt, and this is Born to Win, and this is the Pop Culture Cosmos. That was Hyperschmidt with Born to Win, and you can get it today at hyperschmidt.com. Coming up next, we've got Daphne Matthew talking about The Walking Dead, all the stuff that's going on, all the latest news and rumors coming up right after the break with The Walking Dead, right after the break. This is the Pop Culture Cosmos. And we're back to close out the show. Want to thank Charlie McCormick, Chad Smith, and Hyperschmidt, and Daphne Matthew from the Walking Dead fan base for joining us on today's program. But before we head on out, my friend, I wanted to talk to you about Dragon's Lair. I don't know if you ever got a chance to play this at the arcades. Do you remember it at all?
No, I remember hearing people talk about it. Like my uncles and my cousins. Like I remember them talking about it, but I never have actually gotten a chance to play it.
Because it did come out before your time. Yeah, I'm sorry. Almost like Pearl Jam. It did come out before your time. It was a game where it was like almost like a motion game, almost like a rhythm game, where you had to go ahead and you would control Dirk the Daring through many perilous adventures within a castle to try and save the princess. And in order to do so, you would have to time it out right, whether, you would see a light where you would have to go. And if you didn't do it in the right manner, in the right fashion, at the right time, you would get a horrible death, but hilarious at the same time. It was a very interesting game to play. You had to know the right sequence and all that. And it got harder and harder as you went along, but it was still an entertaining time to play. Well, lo and behold, many years later, Netflix has just announced that they are now going to be in production at some point in time in the near future for a Dragon's Lair adaptation. And who do you think they want as Dirk the Daring but Ryan Reynolds himself, Deadpool, playing playing the lead character? So I ask you, my friend, remembering what your uncles and what everybody else that had played the game said, because for me this is going to be a lot of fun if that's the case. Your thoughts on a Dragon's Lair adaptation, coming for the modern age, with Ryan Reynolds as the lead character?
I think it'd be a good idea. It sounds like Netflix is kind of sorry. They've kind of cultivated a relationship with Ryan Reynolds that's really paying off for them. And if Ryan Reynolds, he does do kind of the same role over and over again, but he's one of those people where if he truly believes in a role, like he will do it well. He will back it 100%. And I think a lot of the projects he's gotten handed for Netflix have been good. Whether or not they're movies that you would pay to go see at the movie theaters, that's a whole other story. But as far as like popcorn viewing goes, a lot of these movies he's made have been really good. So that being said, I'd love to see a Dragon's Lair movie with him. It feels like we see a lot of like fantasy spoofs kind of happening, but they're not executed well usually. So I'd be curious to see what he could do with something like that.
I'm very curious to see what he could do with something like that. I think this is right up his alley. I think this is something that could be very very enjoyable if executed well enough. So I am looking forward to a Dragon's Lair adaptation. I know you are as well. I think this will be something that might, even lift up more of the spirits in regards to video game movie adaptations. I mean, we had a somewhat of a stunted success story in Sonic the Hedgehog, which is doing well now on video on demand, but unfortunately could not reach its full potential due to the events of the coronavirus closing all theaters, so we couldn't really see how well it was going to do. It was on par or getting close to the numbers that it was going to go ahead and in that direction become the greatest, the most successful video game movie adaptation of all time. So it was on that route, but unfortunately, we never got to see that materialize and happen. But still, it's out there on video on demand. If anybody wants to catch it, and it has shined a good light on video game movie adaptation. So hopefully, with that, Uncharted, and very soon, in the not too distant future, Dragon's Lair, we can really get all these video game adaptations coming out that are well thought out, that are well produced, that are given more love than the ones in previous ones, which has given the video game movie adaptation a really bad name in the past. So I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm hoping Netflix will do the right thing. And you're right, my friend. They've got this deal going on with Ryan Reynolds, and looks like Ryan Reynolds is about to get into that Adam Sandler territory when it comes to his association with Netflix, because Adam Sandler's done a whale of a job. No matter how bad you think the movies are, Adam Sandler's done a great job with Netflix, and it looks like Ryan Reynolds will be doing so as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm curious to see like what other properties he could do well. I'm sure he's got a whole list of passion projects that he would like to do, and it sounds like Netflix is the right place for him to do those.
What are your thoughts out there on a Dragon's Lair movie adaptation starring Dirk the Daring, aka Ryan Reynolds? Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Would you like to see a Space Ace after that? Now that's one, if you're really going on the way back, you got to go ahead and you gotta like that as well. Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Well, my friend, it's been a great episode. I cannot thank you enough for joining me. Also, as well, I want to give a big thank you one last time to Charlie McCormick, Daphne Matthew, and Chad from Hyperschmidt for joining us as well. Got to talk about it on the next episode, my friend. You got to go ahead and at least give Contagion and or Outbreak a try. I mean, we can't avoid it much longer, even though in the case of Outbreak, I'd love to, but we got to go ahead and talk about that, at least, if not on the Friday episode. How about the Pop Culture Cosmos next week? Is that good enough time?
Yeah, I'll watch it this week before we get there.
All right. I got a chance also as well to take a look at Tiger King. So I have watched the Tiger King docuseries. I know a lot of people are talking about that one. So I've got some thoughts on the Friday episode, the PC Multiverse. Hopefully a preview of WrestleMania as well coming up on that show as well. And then hopefully I've got a preview of WrestleMania coming up. Yes, I know it was taped, but I've got a preview of WrestleMania coming up on the Friday show as well. One last thing I want to talk to you about, my friend, is you and what you've been doing, what you've been playing, what you've been seeing. You made a post recently on your Facebook page talking about all the stuff that you've been checking out, and it's quite a list, isn't it?
Yeah, hold on, I'm going back to that right now. Okay, so yeah, I have watched CB Strike season 1, so that's on Cinemax, and that is based off the first 3 books of J.K. Rowling's Strike Cormoran novel series. So that one is pretty good. It's only about 7 episodes, so if you have time, I would definitely check out the 7 days free you get of Cinemax via Amazon Prime. It's actually a really good show. Lost in Space season 2. This is a weird show for me because I'm kind of in and out of it. I don't like the lady that plays Dr. Smith. I don't like that role at all. And every time I watch it, it makes me feel like I need to take a shower because she is just so obnoxious and I just cannot stand her part. So I try to watch that, and I've been like skipping through the parts that have her on the screen. So I feel like I'm missing out on a lot. But at the same time, like I can't. This is like I almost walked out of the theater during Dinner for Schmucks, and this is like Dinner for Schmucks times 100 anytime she's on the screen for me. So yeah. Movies I've watched, Dragon Quest Your Story, that's a good one. I think I talked about that a few weeks ago. Ni no Kuni, that's based on the video game series. I haven't finished it yet, so don't really have a lot of thoughts there. Onward is one that I watched, and that one's actually pretty good. I feel like it's very underrated. I can see why people didn't really get into it if you remove the coronavirus factor, just because it's about some things that a lot of people can't relate to, as far as the whole fantasy elements go. Prince of Persia, not a great movie. I'd never seen it before. I found it at Walmart for $5. Wasn't a huge fan of that one. I tried to watch it on Disney Plus a couple times, and I remember that it says you can't watch it because it belongs to another streaming service right now. Games I've played, Ori and the Blind Forest. That's one that I find myself getting very frustrated with platformers. So I have not really spent a lot of time in this one. I've probably played about an hour. And you can check out my gameplay footage on my Humanican Media YouTube page. The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, just started this one, so I'm about an hour into it. Haven't really gotten far in it. Oninaki, Square had a big sale on games, so I played Oninaki on the Switch. Pretty fun game. It's not voiced in English though, so if that's a problem for you, I wouldn't recommend it. Bubble King iOS, if you're a fan of Bust a Move, this is definitely a game you want to play. And then I just finished last night God of War 3 Remastered. And as much as I love the God of War series, like I absolutely love the new God of War game, but the old games are not things that I will be going back to. They're not, the gameplay feels very stale. I don't like the way the camera works. I don't like the character of Kratos until, the latest God of War entry. I probably will not go back to play these games again, but I have officially finished all of the old God of War games from God of War 1, 2, 3, Chains of Olympus, Ascension, Ghost of Sparta. Like I've played all of them, and now I can safely say I will not go back to those. What about you, though? You've been indulging anything?
Oh, quite a bit. And there's not enough time in the show for me to go into it, because I've got quite a list. I'll go a little bit into more detail because I did see one of those things I did see was Tiger King, the docuseries. Hoping to have a guest on that's also seen it too, but if not, I'll go ahead and elaborate more on our upcoming Friday show, the PC Multiverse. Want to go ahead and get into that because yeah, it's something, all right. It's definitely something. So for Josh Peterson, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day in paradise right here in the pop culture cosmos. We thank you for listening. And here's hoping you have yourself a great